Welcome to the Building Up Women in Property podcast. I'm your host, Rebecca Bangura, and I'm thrilled to have you join us today. Whether you're a woman aiming to become a confident, impactful leader, or you're a leader committed to promoting gender equity in the property and construction industry, this podcast is designed specifically for you. Join me every week to gain insights and inspiration that will leave you excited and confident about taking your next steps. Thank you for tuning in. Now let's dive into today's topic. Welcome back. Today, we are continuing our conversation around systemic challenges that keep women stuck in the construction and property industry. And we're continuing the conversation on from last week's episode. And so if you haven't listened to that episode, go back. We'll link it in the show notes for you, but make sure you do. It's a really good intro into this topic. But today, I want to pick up where we left off and really focus on where do we go from here. We know we have these challenges. We know that these systemic issues exist. So what are we going to do about it? And frankly, there are lots of things we can do about it. And some of them are easier than others. And as we go through this today, I want you to think about how does this apply to me? And what can I take from this? And really start to generate the change in our organisations and within our industry so that we can eradicate these systemic barriers. And I'm the first to admit this will not happen overnight. There is no silver bullet here. But what is equally true is that we need to get started. We need to be taking bold steps to create change. And it will be a journey. It will be a process. So one of the first things, and perhaps one of the most obvious, is challenging the stereotypes, whether it's the stereotype of a construction worker being a male or the stay-at-home parent being a female, or what it looks like to be a CEO or the chair of a board or a project manager or a tradesperson. We need to start consciously breaking down these gender stereotypes and replacing them with new possibilities. We need to start seeing women on site not as something to be celebrated, but as the norm. We need to start seeing women in all different roles across all levels of organisation, across all functions within our industry, and at all levels. We need to normalise this instead of patting ourselves on the back. I think what we have tended to see to date tends to be quite tokenistic. And this is so important not only for people coming up through the ranks and for younger generations, but also for our current workforce. And there is a big focus at the moment about how do we attract more women into the industry. And a lot of that conversation is around girls and young women. And there are some incredible programs like Next Generation by Urban Core and Tomorrow's Women in Construction, and the beautiful book by Emma Wallace called This Girl Built That. These are incredible initiatives that are attracting young girls and young women into the industry. But we also need to focus on how do we get more women into the industry right now? Women who can come in and bring their skills and their experience to contribute to the shift in a more immediate way. And one of the key ways to do this is around increasing that visibility and representation of women who are already doing this work in the industry, as well as making sure that we have education and training opportunities that really do support women into the industry. And that can be everything from cadetships and training programs right through to micro-credentials. And we're seeing a huge shift in terms of what is available to our industry through the Institute of Applied Technology, as well as mentoring and development programs. These are all a suite of different tools that can be used to educate and inform and bolster women into the industry. And, I often talk about this as being a kit of parts. There is no one thing that we can do that will change everything in the industry. There is no one thing that will suddenly make gender equality a reality for us. It's much more dynamic and complex than that. And what we need to see is the mix and match of different things working alongside each other in order to generate change and to kind of create a snowball effect that will, in time, really help balance out the playing field in the property and construction space. From tradeswomen right through to executive leadership teams and CEOs and chairs on boards. And if you are listening to this and you're thinking about your own career, your own development, I want to encourage you to think about a couple of things. So part of the program that I take my private clients through is around understanding the capabilities you need within the role that you're in and the role you're aspiring to. And how can you build that skill set if you don't already have it? And then another part of it is around how do we visibly show the knowledge you have? How do we communicate that in a meaningful way? And I know that is often something women feel really uncomfortable doing, having that spotlight on them. But it is vitally important, not only for your own personal and professional growth, but also just to share our stories and to normalize the experience that we have, not only with the challenges within the industry, but also the satisfaction and the joy and the fulfillment that we get through the work we do. Whilst it's not perfect, it does talk to the fact that if we want a seat at the table, we need to come and take it. We need to stop waiting for permission and we need to start demanding. Another key piece to tackling these systemic issues is around work-life balance and the challenges that presents. And this is tied to women often having the majority of carer responsibilities or domestic responsibilities in addition to work. And, we call it the second shift. All of that work that goes into keeping a family or a home functioning that is unpaid and unrecognised, but presents a huge strain in terms of mental load and work required. We need to look at this as an industry. This is things like having parental leave that is not gendered and is available to both mothers and fathers. And it is about actively increasing participation rates for fathers in the industry to take that parental leave. Because we've actually seen that organisations, and this is beyond just the construction industry, that have had parental leave policies in place for a long time, but the uptake from men has been really low because of the stigma associated with men taking time out of the workforce. Because we have this idea that it's okay for a mum to take 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 12 months or years out of the workforce to raise and nurture her children, because we see that as women's work. Whereas a father doing that is perceived very differently. Again, we need to normalise that raising children and caring for elderly family members is not a responsibility solely for a woman. It should be a shared responsibility for men and women alike. Now, that is all notwithstanding the fact that we do work in a very fast-paced and intense and dynamic industry. And at times we have sites that are operational 24/7. And the truth is, this isn't good for anyone. Working 6 or 7 day weeks is not conducive to anyone's well-being, men or women. And, Alison Miriams has done a huge amount of work in terms of promoting and trialling and having discussions around advocating for and trialling the 5-day work week and the huge benefits that has to the workforce as a whole. And whilst I don't know that will become the norm anytime soon, it is important to acknowledge that people do have responsibilities beyond work and they should have a life beyond work. I hope you've been enjoying the episode. I want to take a moment to let you know about my 5-step leadership framework. This is for anyone aspiring to be an exceptional leader, create high-functioning teams and drive consistent and sustainable results. Head over to my website, rebeccabangura.com, to get your free copy or find a link in the show notes. Now, let's get back to the episode. I also want to talk about how we address gender bias. And again, this is a really big topic, but a couple of key ideas and things to think about is how can we remove gender bias through the recruitment process? And this is things like removing names and gender identifying information from CVs. So hiring managers can read the CVs blind to the gender. And the studies have shown that really does change hiring outcomes when gender is not a factor. And it's also about how do we have performance reviews where we openly acknowledge that gender bias exists and really check in with ourselves and our peers about how we may be skewing evaluations because of these biases. And again, bias is such a complex thing, but we need to acknowledge that every single one of us has bias. It is literally a coping mechanism for the brain. Our brains like to generalize and distort information so we can call things up quickly without having to think too much and use up too much brain juice, too much brain power. And that is normal. But what we need to do is have the understanding of what bias is and the different types of bias. We have to increase our own awareness and be able to have conversations within our work environments where we can talk about bias in a way that is non-judgmental and non-confrontational, that will actually allow us to challenge our own bias and to think differently. and correct it as we need to. And, I heard a saying from something, I can't remember where it was, the other day about we're not responsible for our first thought. I really like that idea because the truth is our brain gives us some pretty rubbish thoughts sometimes. And it is because our brains are out to protect us and they run on this automatic process, right? We have this underlying operating system that filters things for us. And the last piece I want to talk about is mentorship, coaching, and sponsorship. Now, these three things, in case you don't know, are all different, but these each have a huge impact in someone's professional development and their career success, particularly for women or those coming from a minority group. And each of these things can be run in a formal program or through an informal program. And I think particularly with sponsorship, this is the space where we need men, we need male allies to be the champions for change and to really support and drive the progression of women within their business. When we think about these things, there is so much that we can do, but it all starts with a single step. I think it's so important that we can have informed and meaningful conversations with each other on these topics to really tackle these issues that we face. And I would love to hear from you. What idea or ideas have you taken away from today's conversation that would help drive your career forward or would help address these systemic issues within your organisation? And if you do want help on this journey, whether you are a woman in the industry or you are a leader looking to create change within the business, within your organisation, then please reach out to me. I would love to have a conversation about how I may be able to support you and your business to really drive change in this area and to drive towards gender equity within our industry. Until the next episode, take care. Thanks for joining me on the Building Up Women in Property podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcast or Spotify, I'd love for you to take a moment and review the show if you found it helpful, or share it with a few friends. Thanks again, have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time.